All right, my favorite time, Bible time. I'm not a pastor or biblical scholar. I just love sharing a passage of the Bible with people. That's what I'm doing today. We finished the Fruits of the Spirit series, so now is something new today. In my daily Bible study, reading through the Bible front to back again, right now I'm in the book of Daniel, and I just decided, why not talk about Daniel 3? This is the famous story where Nebuchadnezzar throws 3 Hebrews into a blazing furnace, and God protects them, and they emerge with not a hair on their heads, or even their clothing singed. I'm calling it Into the Fire. The backstory from Daniel 1 is that the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem and brought back some of the Israeli nobility to serve in his palace. And he's teaching them Babylonian and that sort of thing. This included Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. When they got there, though, Nebuchadnezzar gave them Babylonian names, and the 3 that were thrown in the fire are known today by us as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The new names kind of seem to mock them. I'll put up a little chart where you can see, like Daniel, he's Bel's prince, and who's Bel? Bel is some, demon or something. And then Azariah got changed to Abednego, servant of Nebo, which was probably the planet Mercury, those sorts of things. I'm sure they weren't too thrilled to have these Babylonian names. Later, in Daniel 3, Nebuchadnezzar made a big golden statue, and he commanded nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Obviously, in response, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said to him in verses 17 and 18, if we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. So they were obeying the first and second commandments of Yahweh. Exodus 20, verse 3 through 6. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. So it's very important to God that we do not worship idols, and they just refuse to do it. And I think it's interesting, they acknowledged that God could save them, but they said even if God chose not to save them, because obviously it's God's will, if it's God's will that they should perish in the fiery furnace, they would rather go to their deaths than violate God's law. That is a great attitude to have, obviously. So in response, Nebuchadnezzar ordered the furnace to be heated to 7 times hotter than usual, and for them to be bound and thrown into the furnace. And apparently the furnace was so hot that the soldiers who took them to the furnace were killed. While these 3 men were inside, Nebuchadnezzar noticed that there was a 4th man in the fire. And he said, the 4th looks like a son of the gods. That's verse 25. Many interpret this as a Christophany, i.e. an appearance of the pre-incarnate Jesus. I don't know if I fully subscribe to that or not. I just know that's a popular belief about who the 4th man in the fire was. Others say an angel. Clearly Nebuchadnezzar thought he looked like the Son of God. But I have a 3-part outline for this. That was all the backstory. Point 1 is fury of the king. 2 is firm in the faith. And 3 is favor of the king. Point 1, fury of the king. So the spirit of the age in that time in Babylon demanded that they bow down and worship a golden idol. Today, the spirit of the age demands and pressures us in different ways than it did back then. You don't see leaders commanding that their subjects bow down to golden idols. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to explore what are these demands and pressures that the spirit of the age puts upon us. Because it can be hard to identify modern idols. They're not as obvious as a direct command to bow down to a golden idol. Once I started writing a list of these idols, I was surprised at how long the list is. Before I dive into the spicy list, it's important for me to frame this right, so you don't hear something I'm not saying. I'm not saying that everything on this list is an idol for everybody. Idolatry is one of those things. Is it worship, or is it just something you engage in that's not a problem? For example, some people can drink alcohol in moderation, and some people cannot. For some people, the alcohol is an idol. So what I am saying with this list is that some people in modern times have elevated these items, which I will list, above service to God and biblical doctrine. Some of these things on the list are opposed to biblical doctrine, so, But yes, I'll go through these quickly. My goal is not to linger on any of these too long. But there's 3 broad buckets I did. Western secular doctrine is one of them. Lifestyle is another one. And the third one is personal glory. So I'll start off with Western secular doctrine. First on this list has to be feminism. In the modern version of feminism, abortion, promiscuity, war of the sexes, economic independence, separate bank accounts, diminishment of the family, egalitarianism in marriage, so abandonment of God's design for marriage to be a partnership of equals to have complementary roles. That was the first one. Second is scientific consensus, and we have seen this a ton. I think this is definitely a doctrine which has been elevated above biblical doctrines. Vaccines, COVID pseudoscience, which literally criminalized corporate gatherings of worship of God. That's some biblical stuff right there, in the bad way. Climate change pseudoscience, science that's based on speculative models and is not replicable. Evolution is a huge one. Again, not replicable, based on speculative models. They'll say they know how hot it was, the degrees of temperature, like some absurd number of years ago. Okay, so that second was scientific consensus. Third in the doctrines is the social justice doctrine. This modern thing of weaponized outrage, racial quotas in hiring, and there's a lot of bad stuff that's wrapped up in this. In prayer time tonight, we're discussing how everyone is equal in the eyes of God. No man is better than the other. In modern times, people turn against each other based on beliefs, based on whatever. We're not treated as equals like we used to be. That doctrine of all men are equal is not practiced in modern times. And fourth on the doctrines is the multiculturalism. This is a huge threat to the Christian worldview. Mandatory tolerance of deviant worldviews or religions, including atheism. And my list of Western secular doctrines that can be idolized could go on and on. I guess my point, so are these idols, or is it just extreme pressure to conform? Like, the punishment with Nebuchadnezzar was you go into the fiery furnace. Our punishment in modern times is not so severe, but we do have these social pressures that I think it's important to be aware of. There are a lot of Western secular doctrines that are in opposition to or have completely replaced the biblical worldview. So A was secular doctrine, B is lifestyle. I've got 4 points under this. Consumerism, making idols of possessions. Car, house, clothes, personal belongings. The idea of seeking gratification in acquiring fancy stuff. 2 is instant gratification. So in modern times, intolerance of temporary discomfort, seeking external sources for internal fulfillment. This can be things like drugs, alcohol, food. 3rd is bunk psychology and therapy. So degeneracy is one of these things, this sex positivity idea, shacking up. Individualism, self-expression. These things get elevated higher than biblical doctrine. Meaningless platitudes, putting this under the bunk psychology thing. Examples, just be yourself. Think positively. Like The Secret. Oh, if I just think I'm wealthy, I become wealthy. The law of attraction. Follow your heart. Happiness is a choice. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. People glom onto these platitudes, and it's a replacement for the wisdom of the Bible. You won't see the Bible saying happiness is a choice. It's not in the Bible. 4th under lifestyle is aristocracy, modern aristocracy. College, being college educated, living in a big city. There's a strong disdain for rural or non-college educated people. At least from what I grew up with, I saw that. Again, all men are not created equal. It's like, oh, if you have this upbringing, if you live in the country or you didn't go to college, well, you're a little bit lesser. So yeah, that's under the category of lifestyle. Final one, personal glory. And I'm sure we can all find some stuff in here. Number 1 is obsession with physical perfection. So people are seeking after their own personal glory. They're seeking to get compliments, to look great in the eyes of other people. fitness, plastic surgery, people modifying their bodies. Search for the tonic of youth. These are idols, and they're damaging. They're damaging to people for sure. Another one in the personal glory, number 2, is achievement, achieving money. Money is an indicator of success, and so you got tons of money, you must be really successful. Personal achievement, personal glory. Conspicuous consumption, trying to keep up with the Joneses. Large house, fancy things. And then another one in here is power. Young people are very interested in becoming influencers on YouTube or Instagram or whatever. They want to be seen, they want to be heard for their personal glory. Those are things that I think people can turn into modern idols, things that were pressured. The spirit of the age kind of fuels these things. Finally, going back to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, they refused to bow before the golden idol, and there is punishment, not nearly as much as the fiery furnace, but there is punishment for going against the spirit of the age. All those things I listed, there's often a penalty for speaking out against those things or just saying that there's an alternate worldview. I remember when nobody was speaking out against feminism, for example. And don't mishear me, I'm not speaking out against equality. I think equality is fantastic. Everyone is equal in the sight of the Lord. Okay, second major point, firm in the faith. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow down to the idol and violate the first and second commandments of Yahweh. How are they able to speak with such boldness? Well, Matthew 10, verse 19 through 20 says, "But when they arrest you, do not worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time you'll be given what to say, for it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you." That's amazing. I think that probably happened. They spoke so boldly and so clearly. I am certain that the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, was speaking through them to Nebuchadnezzar, saying, "No, we will not bow down and worship your idol, even if it means our death." You do sadly see this in modern times in some African nations, Christians being told, renounce your Christian faith or you will die. And Christians are saying, we will not renounce our faith and being killed on the spot. Yeah, may I just say, thank God that is not the situation in our country. A lot of people have it much worse right now. Psalm 27, verse 1. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?" You can take my life, but you can't take away my love of God. And God is bigger than anything. Jeremiah 1, verse 8. "Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord." And that's something he said to Jeremiah on the condition that Jeremiah goes where God sends him and does whatever God commanded him to do. So, you walk with the Lord's got you. Of course, it doesn't mean that we won't die. I mean, like I mentioned, people in Africa are being murdered for refusing to renounce their Christian faith. But I firmly believe we have great reward in heaven. Martyrs have a great reward in heaven for standing firm in the faith. Third major point is the favor of the king. Okay, so after all that, after Nebuchadnezzar saw them come out of the furnace without a hair singed or anything, Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way." And then the king promoted them. So that's the favor of the king. And I mean, as they said, even if God didn't save them, they loved God enough not to falter in the faith. Psalm 27, verse 4. "One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek him in his temple." All the days of my life. You can't just set it aside for one day. Oh, I'll just worship this idol one day. No, it's all the days of my life. That's what we should seek. The king whose favor we should seek is not Nebuchadnezzar. The king whose favor we should seek is King Jesus, even if it means going to our death. However, sometimes our faithfulness will also result in blessings from the world. That should never be our motivation for standing firm in the faith. Yes, they were promoted. They had this great change of heart from Nebuchadnezzar, and glory be to God for that. God is the one who's pulled them from that furnace. My ardent desire is to hear from the Lord "Well done, good and faithful servant." Matthew 25, verse 23. His Lord said unto him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord." That's from a parable. That's my desire, to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Hebrews 11 to 12 mentions great figures in the faith. It talks about martyrs of the faith. It talks about all these great things that were done. This is from Hebrews 11:37 through Hebrews 12, verse 3. It's a longer passage here. "They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. These were all commended for their faith. Yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, that only together with us would they be made perfect. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. A big part of being faithful to God is resisting the spirit of the age, and we don't face death. The consequences that we can face for going against the spirit of the age is so minor compared to what martyrs of the faith had to experience in the past. And like I said, are experiencing in Muslim parts of the world. I pray that God would give us the strength to do just that, to resist the spirit of the age and stand firm in the faith. That's all I've got on the passage of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. There's a lot we can apply to our lives today. And let me know if you have anything to add to my list. Yeah, there definitely are pressures in the modern age. And I tried to capture some of those. But I'll close this with prayer. Lord, you can see our hearts. You know our motivations. We can make anything into an idol, and we do. We make things into idols. We abandon biblical doctrine in order to get along with the spirit of the age. We just try to keep our head down and out of trouble. Lord, I pray that you would give us all the strength to stand firm and to say no when something is wrong, and not go along with ideas that are opposed to your law, to the way you would have us live. Lord, I thank you for this time to study your word. Pray that you would move in a mighty way to help us all learn the lesson from this story from the Old Testament in Daniel 3. Lord, I love you, and I thank you for everything you've given to us. And I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Now may the Lord of peace himself give you peace always and in every way. The Lord be with you all. See you next time.